Well, hello everybody. This is Lawrence Clark, and we are going to be talking today about how to write persuasive proposals. And this should be very interesting to any of you who are writing apps for your work, your school, or brochures, or anything else that has to do with being persuasive. So we have a lot of stuff to cover, and we're going to just go ahead and jump right in. And the first thing I'd like to just mention is that this webinar is brought to you free of charge. And as everything that's free in the world, there is somebody paying for it. And that is the communicationleader.com, which is a website which, oh gee, whose face is that on there? It's my face, yes. So I'm sponsoring the webinar with my own company here at the communicationleader.com, where you can find lots of different resources for writing and speaking, and you can find lots of recommendations for great articles and all kinds of cool stuff. So there's the end of our commercial announcement. I do have one other exciting thing to announce in a little bit. I'll mention it later on. Now, just in case you are not familiar with who I am, if you saw a link to the webinar on the internet or something, and you said, "Who's this Lawrence J. Clark guy, and why is he talking about persuasive language and rhetoric and all this kind of stuff?" Well, there's a little list. That's the short list of my academic background. I am, yes, I'm a geek. I like to learn stuff, and as you notice, my postgraduate certifications and experience are even longer than my actual academic background. But yes, there's a few degrees there and certificates and all kinds of stuff. So that's enough of that. All right. I am also a persuasion and sales psychology specialist, and I've, besides my academic background, I have worked in a lot of different fields, including sales, copywriting, advertising, and I've sold everything. Started out selling newspapers when I was a kid, and then I've sold life insurance, home appliances, advertising, auto leasing, all kinds of different stuff. And I also own my couple of businesses, own several businesses throughout my life, and several websites. So I'm always having to persuade people of stuff to buy my products, to hire me as a conference speaker, to come to my seminars, all kinds of different things. So I've had a lot of experience persuading people of stuff. Sometimes I'm more successful than others, but the strategies that I'm going to show you today are going to help you to be more successful in those areas than you would be otherwise. Let's just hope that anyway. All right, some other things that I like to do. In my spare time, I call myself the singing poet guy, and I go out and perform for kids and try to promote literacy, because I think it's really important for kids to read, and I try to make it fun for them. And oh, here's some embarrassing pictures of me. I'm also a singer-songwriter, and I don't do as much of that as I used to, but this is back in my Austin, Texas singer-songwriter days. Yes, when I still had more hair. Anyway, all right. Lately, though, I have been referred to as a compliment, the Napoleon Hill of 21st century influence and persuasion. And if you're not familiar with Napoleon Hill, he's the author of Think and Grow Rich and several other works. He went around and interviewed several of the captains of industry back in the early 20th century and wrote his famous book trying to figure out why were they so successful, what were some of the common denominators. And I've been doing something similar, going out and interviewing people in different areas, including online marketers and salespeople and politicians and other people who persuade others for a living. And so I have a couple of books coming out in those areas pretty soon. And then I said I had an exciting announcement for you, and this is actually the module that I'm doing today is actually part of a course that I recently had finished recording with my friend Daniel Hall, who is an attorney. So you get an attorney and a college professor together, and yes, we talked for 10.5 hours on live webinars and talked about all kinds of different ways to influence and persuade people. So we have a 6-module online course. It's not available quite yet. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks it will be available, and if you just check back at thecommunicationleader.com, you will see that. Okay, now a little bit about you. Okay, I'd just like to congratulate everybody that's on this webinar for just being so dang smart, all right? And I want to honor you for your commitment and your investment in yourself by taking the time out of your day to listen to what I have to say. And I really am humbled and honored at that, that you would take your time out and listen to this advice that I'm giving you. So I, in turn, promise to give you the best that I can give you during this time. So I hope it will be useful for you. All right, now enough bragging about myself and enough sucking up to you. Let's go ahead and learn something. Are you ready? All right. Now, in today's webinar, it's divided into 3 different parts. We're going to first talk about persuasion in written communication. And if you have seen any of my other webinars, I often start out by talking about one of my favorite dead Greek guys. His name is Aristotle, and so this might be a little review for you if you've seen some of my other webinars. It may be totally brand new for you if you have not been exposed to it, but I think it's really, really important to keep in mind Aristotle's 3 available means of persuasion is what we're going to be talking about. Then the second part, we're going to be talking about writing effective proposals. And then in our third part, we will discuss reader-centered writing. This is some techniques and strategies to keep your reader in mind, and because you always want to consider your audience, your reader. And this is important so that the reader feels needed and wanted and feels like you care about him or her. And then also, it's just a really good persuasive strategy, as we will see. So those are the 3 parts, and let's go ahead and get started with part 1, which is I call persuasion in written communication. Now, one of the things that is interesting is that no matter who we're trying to persuade, they all hear our pitch or our argument or our request, whatever it is that we're saying, they hear it differently. And when I say hear it, they could be hearing it in person if you're talking to them, or they could be hearing it in their own voice when they're reading your words. Okay? Now, different people have what we call convincer buttons. And there are actually scientifically, psychologically proven tools that can be used to push these buttons. Maybe you've heard that term before. Oh yeah, you really pushed somebody's button, right? It means you really got to them. You made them think something or feel something. Usually when we say push somebody's button, it's usually in a negative way, and you made them mad, okay? But it can also be used in a positive way where you push certain emotional buttons or logical buttons or other kinds of buttons that will help them. And then these tools are what I call the secret recipe that have been used by world influencers and persuaders. Let's see here. Okay. I just got a weird little message on my computer. Hopefully that went away. All right. Now, okay. So there are many different factors at play in persuasion and in influence, and as I mentioned, we went over, there's 6 different modules in the Real Fast Persuasion and Influence program. In this particular module, we're going to talk about the words that are highlighted in red here in these concepts. So we're going to talk about using facts and logic, credibility and authority, emotions, and then we're going to talk a little bit about using language and especially reader-centered writing by choosing particular words and word order, etc. Now, I also like to call this the persuasion toolbox because these are the tools that we use to persuade other people and to influence them. So that's what, when I talk about different tools, strategies, techniques, those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. So if you think of them as your toolbox, that if you have them in your toolbox, like a mechanic needs to fix certain things and it needs certain tools to fix a car, or different tools to fix a computer, or different tool to fix the tire on the car than to fix the motor, when you're trying to persuade other people, you might need different tools to use in different situations. And depending on the person that you're trying to influence or persuade, depending on the situation, depending on the idea that you're trying to persuade them of, that's all going to affect the tool that you will use. So I'm going to talk about several different tools today. And you are going to be able to use these different strategies or tools to do lots of different things. You could, if you're a manager, you can help improve your employees' morale and help get them more motivated. You can improve your personal relationships by being able to persuade your significant other or other family members, right? Or you can understand how they're trying to persuade you. And then you can decide logically whether you're going to do what they want you to do or not. Okay. So don't blame it on me, though, if you're getting in an argument. Okay. You can also, if you're in sales or any kind of sales or trying to raise funds for charities, you can use these techniques. You can also use these strategies and tools to persuade your kids. If you have kids, to do things like do their homework, take out the trash, that kind of stuff. So these all date back, though, to Aristotle. So you might have heard of Aristotle in other ways. You might have heard of Aristotle in your science class, or you might have heard of Aristotle in philosophy or history. But Aristotle was also what we call a rhetorician. And a rhetorician is a person who's good at rhetoric. So what is rhetoric? Well, it is the art of using the available means of persuasion. That is Aristotle's definition. And I'm going to be teaching you a little bit about that in the next few minutes. Now, Aristotle was a pretty curious guy, and he liked science, he liked philosophy, he liked all kinds of different things. But one of the other things he liked to do is observe human interaction. And he would go down and watch people as they were trying to persuade each other. He would watch politicians, he would watch salespeople, and he tried to figure out what was it that made some people more persuasive than others. Well, even if they had the same products or that they were selling, or maybe even similar political ideas, was it that they were just better looking, or their voice sounded better, or what was it? Well, he figured out that there were 3 different categories that most people who are good at persuasion would use. And these categories he called ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos, pathos, and logos. That's what we're going to talk about right now. Now, ethos is the perceived character or credibility of the speaker or the writer. Now, I just want to mention one thing real quickly here, that a lot of these concepts can also work well in your speech. They don't all translate, because when we talk about reader-centered writing, for example, those strategies work mostly in writing. But a lot of these also work well if you're giving a speech, or let's say if you're doing one-to-one sales in an office or in a store, anywhere. So I just wanted to say that. So the ethos is the character, credibility, or authority of the person doing the speaking or the writing. Pathos is appealing to people's emotions, and logos is appealing to logic or facts. So ethos is important because if the person who is writing is perceived to have authority or good character, or is able to borrow that credibility from other people, that person will be believed. Now, if you'll notice, in the very beginning of this webinar, I went through and I showed you just a couple of things about myself. One was my academic credentials and the fact that I've got a couple of books and I'm doing this and that project, that I have some certifications. Well, I didn't do that just to brag on myself. Well, I do like to talk about myself. Okay, I admit that. Ask my wife. Okay, but the main reason I did that is to show you that, yes, thank you very much. Okay, I'm getting a few comments and people, yes, they know me. Okay, or they have heard my other webinars before and they know that I go on and on. But I do teach you something important, honest. All right, now anyway, see, you got me off track there, making me laugh. I shouldn't read the question box while I'm trying to do the webinar here. All right. So if the person has good character, then that's important. But also if they're authoritative, if they know what they're talking about, right? So I was trying to show you that by showing you my academic credentials. I also showed you a couple of personal things about myself, that I like to sing and play music. Also that I like to do things for kids and community service with the singing poet guy. So that kind of shows that I'm a decent human being, hopefully, right? So what I didn't show you, I could have, but I'm just trying to keep this part of the section short. I could have given you all kinds of testimonials, some quotations from former college students that I've had, from former clients that I've had, from former people I've done business with, or other people who have learned from me in workshops and seminars. I have a hard drive full of all kinds of quotes that I could use, and that we call that borrowed credibility. And there's a really good book I'd like to recommend if you're interested in this area, written by a guy named Robert Cialdini, Cialdini, and the book is called Influence. And in that, he talks about several different means of psychological triggers that you can use to help persuade people. I have a whole nother webinar in which I talk about those. We also cover those in the Real Fast Influence and Persuasion program as well. But if you're interested in that, I would check out his book. It's available on Amazon or any bookstore probably. Okay. Now, some examples of ethos might be, say, a university professor, or maybe a judge who has authority and credibility, right? Maybe a celebrity person. Now, sometimes celebrities get authority and credibility when they don't really deserve it. Okay, so it's always kind of funny to me to see some 17-year-old singer pop star up there talking about politics or something, and they're actually quoting her on the news. She hasn't really earned that in my book anyway. I mean, maybe she's a homeschooled kid who's really smart and has been following politics all her life, but normally that's not the case, right? Now, a good example though of a celebrity who earned the right to at least talk about maybe not politics, but basketball shoes would be Michael Jordan, who was one of the world's most famous basketball players. And so he has some shoes with his brand on them. And people buy them because they believe that he wouldn't use them if they weren't good. So he wouldn't put his name on them if they weren't good. So he's really happy about that. And that's why he smiles a lot, because he gets lots of money. All right. Okay, another example of ethos would be scientists and doctors. Now, this also leads into another one of Aristotle's means of persuasion, which is called logos, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But when we hear scientists and doctors, when we hear them telling us things like, don't drink caffeine, or limit your cholesterol, don't smoke cigarettes, that kind of stuff, we believe them because they're supposed to be smart people, right? Now, what they do, though, is they use another form of persuasion, which is called logos, to persuade us by doing scientific experiments and then creating charts out of statistics and surveys and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a mixture. but we believe them, they're credible and authoritative because we think they're smart and they are dealing in the hard sciences, and especially us liberal arts majors tend to believe the scientists because, well, we're not good at math and science, so we just let them do it. All right. Another way credibility and authority is used, ethos, is on TV. So if you've ever seen TV commercials and you see an actor dressed up like a doctor or and talking about some new medicine, maybe you might see an infomercial and the announcer says, "Run to the phone right now, dial this number, act now before it's too late." Or an internet marketer might write or say, "Click here, go ahead, sign up now for my free newsletter or for my next program or my new product." Well, they're using authority because when somebody says something like, "Run to the phone right now, act now, click here, go ahead, sign up," those are kind of commands. And I'm getting into another area that's more psychology than rhetoric, but you need to know about this because if you tell people to do something, especially in certain cultures, we are conditioned to do it. So we're conditioned to obey our teachers, obey policemen and women, obey the military figures, obey our parents. So if somebody tells us to do something, our first reaction is to go do it. Now, there are some of us who are a little more rebellious. Our first reaction might be to say, "Well, why? Who are you? Why are you telling me to do this?" But for most people, the first reaction is just to go and do it. So that's why infomercials and TV commercials use us. All right, now let's talk about pathos for just a minute. Pathos is appealing to emotions. And for example, you'll see an advertisement on TV or in a magazine where you'll see a picture of a hungry child, and they'll say something like, "You can help feed this child for a whole month," for, I don't know, maybe not a month, but let's say a whole week for the cost of one cup of coffee, right? And it works, okay, because we see the sad little kids and we want to help them. Animal rescue groups use the same thing. They use a lot of emotion in their advertisements. See this little sad little puppy, okay? But then actually next to it, it says, "This lucky puppy was saved, but thousands are still waiting." Well, what are they waiting for? Well, they're waiting to die if you don't come pick them up or if you don't send enough money to feed them, right? So that's what's implied there. So there's a lot of emotion. Either you feel sad for the puppy or you feel happy that this one got saved, but they're using a lot of emotion in here. All right. Many of you have seen these kind of commercials, right? Or advertisements. So for the online dating services. So that's also using a lot of emotion. Either you see this picture and you feel really happy and you say, "Oh, you know, I wish I had somebody to be happy with like that, and I'd like to be happy, and so that makes me feel happy, and I think I'll go buy their service and find a date." Or it might work the other way. You might make you feel sad and lonely and miserable. "Well, it's not fair. How come they're happy and I'm not? Well, I'd better go sign up so I can be happy too." Right? But either way, they don't care. If they got you, they got to your emotions, then they got your money. All right. You've seen some other commercials. Depending on your age, you may or may not remember some of these commercials with the Gazelle workout machine, or with Richard Simmons there on the right. "Come on, ladies, let's go." Okay. Anyway, I wonder if he's still around, actually. It'd be fun to see what he's doing now. But all right. We won't get off the track. The point is that they are capitalizing on your feelings, okay? So you can do this when you are writing your proposals, and we're going to talk about how to do that yourself, right? So feelings can be very persuasive. Now remember, I talked about logos earlier. So the scientists and researchers and doctors, we believe them for one reason, because they are credible and authoritative, because they've gone through medical school and all that. But the other reason we believe them is because they have done scientific experiments, and they have the facts, and they say, we went in the laboratory and we poured this chemical into this chemical, and then we figured out that if you have high cholesterol, then it's going to lead to this heart disease, and they figured it out somehow, so we believe them, right? So some people don't care about emotions. Some people don't care who you are. If you're going to try to convince this kind of person, you need to give them facts and give them logic. So people like just TV detectives, but real detectives, and also scientists and engineers, doctors. And if you know anybody that's an engineer or a scientist or any of those kind of fields, usually they deal with the hard facts, right? So they're going to be more persuaded by science and logic. So remember how I said earlier that you have your little persuasion toolbox, and you want to pick out the right tools at the right time to use. Again, sometimes the tool you're going to use depends on the situation. Sometimes it depends on the person that you're trying to persuade. Sometimes it depends on the topic that you're trying to persuade them about. So you want to know about all three of these. But these are the three basic ones. Statistics is another way to use logos. Okay. All right. So some ways that you can use these in your life are to dress professionally and look your best, to have good ethos and credibility, because people do judge a book by its cover or a human by his or her clothes, right? It's absolutely true. No matter what you want to think, it's true. If somebody dresses like a bum, they're probably a bum. Okay, and you're not going to buy a motivational program from somebody who has holes in their shoes and drives a beat-up Pinto, right? Okay, so you want to dress professionally, look your best. You want to do the same thing with all of your business cards, your brochures, your website, any literature that you're going to give to your customers. You want it to be very professionally done. If you're printing out the proposal rather than sending it by email, you want to print it on nice paper, put your company logo on it and all that. You can also use borrowed ethos, remember, borrowed credibility from other people. You can include in your proposal, you can include testimonials from previous customers, or you can include quotations from other experts in the field. So if you're writing a proposal about some issue in employee engagement or employee morale, and you're trying to give some suggestions to in your workplace, and you're trying to suggest to your boss some different ways to improve employee morale, well, what you do is you go look up articles and books that have been written about other companies that have improved employee morale, and how have they done that. And then you go and you quote those people who wrote the article, or you quote a case study that was cited in the article. And then you can use that in your proposal because you're borrowing that credibility from those other people, that other company who did that. You can use pathos by incorporating, sometimes you can have a sad story but with a good ending. So for example, you can tell a sad story about some company that did not improve their morale, and then all the employees quit, and then or they had a high turnover in the company, and then the company started doing poorly, and they lost out to the competition, and the company went under, right? Or you could say, well, but this other company was on the decline, but then they brought in a specialist who did these activities with human resources, and they included some incentives for the employees and some activities for them to boost their morale, some bonuses, more vacation time, whatever else, right? And then because of that, you rise up and have a good end. And company is successful and employees are happy, and blah. You can also use humor, and you can also use shock and dismay. You know, here's the company that did improve their morale and they were doing better. Here's what happened to the company that didn't. Well, see that big empty factory over there? That's where they used to be, right? And you show a picture of it. You can also use logos. You can use facts and charts and statistics and just about anything. So again, I'm speaking to a wide, varied audience here today. Some of you are professional salespeople. Some of you are grant writers. Some of you are advertising and copywriters. Some of you are college students writing reports in school. So there are lots of different situations. So I'm trying to give lots of different types of examples. So hopefully you can see a use for some of these three in whatever it is that you do. Because if you can understand them, this will help you to influence other people's decisions, and you can use it to persuade other people to buy from you or to donate to your cause, whatever. And if it's your job to make more money, hopefully you'll make more money, or you'll get more money donated to help the children or the puppies or whoever else you're trying to help. Okie dokie. Now let's talk about specifically about proposals for a little bit. First thing you want to do when you're doing a proposal is to get down on one knee. That's what I did, and it worked. Okay, so that's the end of my proposal section. Uh-oh, the comments are pouring in again. Okay, I better stop. All right. Okay. I promise I'll give you some good information. Just hold on a minute. All right. Okay, here we go. Now, proposals are about two things, mainly. Money and power. Okay. Who is going to do what? For whom are they going to do it? How much is it going to cost? And how long it takes time in there too. So proposals are about money, power, and time. So who does what? For whom are they doing it? How much is it going to cost? And how long is it going to take? So in this section, I'm going to talk about understanding the purpose of a proposal. I'm going to talk about the rhetorical situation. I will discuss using plain or reader-centered writing and persuasive language. So, one aspect of proposals is what we call interpretation. You are trying to interpret a situation so that you can assess it and fix it. So let's say if you have a problem that you're trying to fix, and there's a problem in your community, or there's a problem in your workplace, or in your church, or in your school, in your volunteer organization, in your company, okay? First thing you need to do is you need to ask the right kind of questions to figure out what the situation is. And so this is kind of a high-level thinking here, okay? But just go with me for a minute. What you want to do is you see a situation that isn't working, right? It's wrong, or it's chaotic, or it's illegal or unethical, or whatever the reason why, but it's just not right. And then what you want to do is figure out what is it that is not right about it. Okay? So you have to impose your mental structure on that situation. Figure out what it is that's not right. Figure out what's important, what's not important, what's essential, what's not essential, of all the different data you're collecting in your mind or in your notes or in your computer. And then what you're going to do, you're going to interpret that, and then through your proposal, you're going to try to impose order on that situation. Okay? So you figure out what the situation is, you interpret it, you assess it, you're going to do some research, try to figure out the facts, and then you're going to try to solve the problem by imposing some kind of order on that situation. And the order could be a new policy, it could be buy my product and that will fix your situation. It could be changes in behavior. It could be all kinds of different things. But somehow you're trying to solve a problem by doing research, assessing it, interpreting it, and then imposing some type of order on it. So this is one of the most important slides here, because once you get this, you will understand the whole purpose of doing these proposals. And they can be used for lots of different life situations, as I've already mentioned. Okay. Now, there's another side of proposals, and this is called expression. So what this means is after you have interpreted the situation and then you have developed a strategy to attack that situation, okay, to handle the situation, to fix the situation, well then you need to convince other people that your idea to fix the situation is the best idea. Now sometimes you're going to be competing with other people who are also trying to fix that situation. So let's say, for example, you are in the insurance business, okay, and you're trying to sell group life insurance to a large corporation. Well, trust me, that large corporation is going to get more than one bid, meaning they're going to ask more than one company to give them a proposal about the life insurance and how their employees could be covered for life insurance and medical insurance and all that. So let's say all insurance, not just life insurance, good, medical insurance as well. Now, they'll probably get 5 or 6 or maybe even 10 different insurance companies to give them a proposal, meaning this is what we're going to do for you, this is how much it's going to cost, this is who will do what, this is how long we're going to cover you for this amount of money, right? So remember those things in our other slide. So in order for you to convince them, you are going to need to do it in a certain order. You're going to need to pull out every single persuasive tool that you have in order to persuade them. And basically what you're going to do in the content of your proposal is describe what the current situation is, discuss what the problem is, then you're going to set some goals, and you're going to say this is how we're going to fix the problem, and then you need to promote it to the people who are the decision makers. So this is why, for example, I have some college students who are actually on this call today, and these students are doing a project in which they are trying to solve a problem in their local community or in their workplace or in another organization to which they belong. And one of the problems I have with them sometimes is I tell them they're going to do a problem-solving proposal, and they want to write an essay about world hunger or about saving the environment or stopping global climate change or something, right? Well, yes, those are issues and might be problems that need to be solved, but you have to think about the context, right? Could a college student solve world hunger with an 8-page report? I wish. I wish it were that simple, right? But it's just not going to happen, right? So what I try to have them do is look at a real-life situation that they see right around them in their local area. So that way they know who the decision maker is. They can talk to that person or that committee. They can assess the situation without trying to figure out some big grandiose plan. So this is what every single proposal is about, though. No matter if you're a salesperson or if you're a college student or if you are writing a grant proposal trying to get funding for your nonprofit organization, whether you're a politician trying to get a bill passed, you have to do these same steps. Describe the current situation, do some research, figure out what's going on, assess it like we already talked about, set some goals, how are you planning to solve it, and then you need to promote it and give it to the people who can make the decisions. So hopefully they will read it, they will believe it, and they will do what you ask them to do. Okay, so that's the expression side. Now let's look at the rhetorical situation. This is something that you might have heard of way back in your high school English class when you're writing essays. But this is something that it applies to real life. Believe it or not, sometimes what you learn in school actually applies to real life. And the longer you're out of school, the more you realize that, right? For those of us who have been out of school for a while, I won't tell you how many years, but you can probably find it out by looking it up on the internet. As much as I try to hide my my birth date, for example, from Facebook, I thought I was being sneaky and, not sneaky, but trying to protect myself from identity thieves and everything by not putting my actual birthday on Facebook. Well, then what happens on my actual birthday? All of my friends start saying, "Hey, happy birthday, have a great birthday." Well, thanks, folks. Okay, you just gave all the identity thieves my real birthday now. All right. Anyway, so meaning that you can go find out when my birthday is, then you can guess how old I am. Okay. So the rhetorical situation has 5 parts: your subject, your purpose, your audience, context, and objectives. Now let's go through each one. The subject. 2 things you want to know. What is the proposal about, and what is it not about? Okay? What is inside the box? What is outside the box? So, for example, when I was describing earlier, when I have college students trying to solve world hunger with an 8-page research paper. Well, you can't do that. Okay, it's just not going to happen. Okay, so that proposal can't be able to solve that problem. However, could that student write to, do some research in their local community and find out how it would be possible to maybe establish a food bank in their own church or in their own school that could at least alleviate some hunger somewhere in the world, right? So in this case, it would be, the proposal would be, the stuff that's inside the box would be all the local community stuff. Maybe some information from what other local communities do as support, maybe some quotations from articles or videos or any other information source, interviews. But it would not have anything to do probably with United Nations giant food programs and UNESCO and all that stuff, right? Okay, so what you have to do is decide what's going to stay in the box or what's going to be out of the box in order for your decision maker to make an informed decision. So let's put this in a sales situation. If you're trying to sell a certain product to a company, let's say you're in manufacturing sales and you're trying to sell them some air conditioning equipment that is going to help them to have a safer and cleaner and more comfortable environment for their employees, and you're trying to sell this to a giant factory. Well, maybe your company also manufactures other things. Maybe you manufacture refrigerators and stoves and other appliances and who knows what else, right? Are you going to go in with a brochure and a big proposal and try to just hand them your entire catalog of everything your company makes? No, you're going to only give them the information about the air conditioning units that your company makes. Now, let's say your company makes several different types of air conditioning units. Maybe you even have a whole catalog full of just that. But some of them are for residences, some of them are for office buildings, some of them are smaller units for portable buildings, and some of them are for large factories. Well, you're not going to go in there and tell them about the residential units, the ones that are made for people's homes. You're not going to give them information about the one that's made for a small office building. You're only going to give them the information about the units that are designed for that size of a factory that you're trying to sell it to, right? So you want to decide what you're going to include, what are you not going to include. All right. You also want to determine your subject. And there's something called stasis questions, S-T-A-S-I-S, stasis questions. These are used a lot in legal circles. So if you've ever, if you're an attorney or if you've ever had much experience in the courts, hopefully not as a criminal, but hopefully if you've worked in the courts, let's just put it that way, you will know that the attorneys and the judge always ask these three questions. Is there a problem? What exactly is the problem, and what type of problem is it? So, for example, in the court, they would say, is there a problem? Is there a dead person? Is there a dead body? Okay. Well, what is the problem? Did the person die of natural causes, or was the person killed by someone else? Okay, and then if it's determined that the person was killed by someone else, then you want to ask, well, what type of problem is it? Okay, was this an accident? Did the person run out in the street and accidentally got hit by a car? Or was it a crime of passion because somebody was sleeping with somebody's partner and the other person didn't like it and got mad? Or was it planned out? Was it some kind of terrorist thing? Or was it planned out in order to murder the person and steal their money, right? So depending on the answer to those questions, first of all, they decide whether there's going to be a case or not in the court. And then if there is a case, what are the charges going to be, and how severe is that going to be? All right. So is there a problem? What exactly is the problem? What type of problem is it? Those are your stasis questions. Then you want to think about your scope. What do my readers need to know, and what don't they need to know? Because you do not want to get your reader all frustrated by providing a bunch of information they don't need to know. So as I mentioned earlier with the example of the factory, you don't want to give them information about the residential home units when they need a big, huge unit or maybe multiple units for their factory. Again, I find this whenever I'm dealing with, I think it's two different types of clients. I'll call them both clients because they're people for whom I am helping in different ways. So one would be college students, and the other one would be outside salespeople. Salespeople who are, who go out in the field and try to sell things. Both of these two groups tend to have this major problem, that they will write a proposal, and in the beginning of the proposal, they'll sit there and give a bunch of either information that the reader already knows, or the information that the reader doesn't really care about. Okay, so here's an example. You're writing a memo to your supervisor, to the manager or the president of your company, somebody higher up in your company, and you're trying to describe a problem in your department. Well, what I've seen is a lot of times people will start out because they don't really know what to start with, right? So they decide they have to give some background. So they're writing and they say, X company was founded in 1984 and has 3,200 employees and is located in Dayton, Ohio. Well, if you're writing to the president of the company already knows that. All right, but people just don't think sometimes when they're going to write something. Okay. Another problem is giving them a bunch of irrelevant information, or instead of focusing on the company and their needs, your client and client's needs, they focus on their own company. So it might be a 20-page proposal, and the first 5 pages gives the background and history of their own company, and before they finally get to how they're going to help the possible client, right, potential client. So this just is a similar mistake I've found with these two groups that I help, is giving people too much information, or information they already know, or information that they don't need to know. Just get to the point and tell them how you're going to help them. All right. Another thing to remember is your purpose. What outcome are you expecting? What do you want to achieve? I mean, because you're writing this proposal, right? So what do you want to happen? All right. So if your reader reads your proposal, what do you want them to do? Do you want them to buy your product? Do you want them to use your service? Do you want them to upgrade? Maybe it's already a client and they're already using your service, but you want them to upgrade to a higher level of service. Or are you just wanting them to believe something? You're trying to persuade them that they need to recycle, or they need to use more solar energy in the company, or they need to vote for a certain cause, or a political candidate, right? A religious view, whatever it is. What is it that you want your reader to do? Because sometimes people get so caught up in doing all the research and doing all the writing that this kind of gets lost. Okay, so what I just recommend is really simple. Just try to get this really clear. Try to write it out in one sentence. What is it that I want my reader to do? Buy more stuff, okay? Or buy my stuff instead of the competitor's stuff. Or buy more of my stuff, or buy a higher level of my stuff, okay? Or donate X amount of dollars to my nonprofit charity organization, right? Whatever it is, write that on a little sticky note, tape it on your computer screen, and keep it in your mind. Look at it often as you're writing, and then make every word of your proposal lead to that purpose. Okay, now let's talk about the audience. To whom are you going to address the proposal? Who's going to actually read it? Well, sometimes you don't know. You might address the proposal to the president of the company, but that's not really who deals with that particular issue in that company. Especially if it's a large corporation, they have people, right? They have people to handle that kind of stuff. That's why it's a big company, right? And so sometimes you have a primary audience, but then sometimes there's also a secondary audience who is actually going to read and implement it. Maybe the primary audience reads it, but then they hand it off to somebody else to implement, right? So another thing you want to do is think about who those readers might be. Your primary reader, again, is the people or the person to whom the proposal is addressed, the person who could make the decision. Again, though, sometimes that's not always the person who makes the decision, but it has to go through that person. But there are the secondary readers. It might go to a committee, or there might need to be attorneys or accountants who have to look at it before they can approve certain parts of it. Then you have what we call tertiary readers. This is a third level of readers. It might be people who you didn't want to see the document in the first place, okay? Like news reporters or some advocacy group. And there are lots of case studies about this where, let's say there's 2 oil companies and they're bidding back and forth, or an oil company is trying to get support from a politician to get a law changed so that they can do more drilling or something, and then an environmental group will get a hold of some of the memos that have been gone back and forth, and they send it to a news reporter, and then the next thing you know, that it's being published, and 3 million people have read that memo that you thought was only going to one particular person. All right, so you need to think about it. Not that that's always going to happen, but you need to think about what if, right? What if this proposal or this memo got out to these other people? Just be careful what you're going to put in there, right? So sometimes, you have to put in certain facts and statistics and everything, especially if it's important for your deal. But don't do things like say something bad about other people. Don't use racial slurs and, obviously sexist language, that kind of stuff, because it'll get you in trouble and bite you in the butt later. Okay. Now, your last kind of audience is we call the gatekeeper. And this might be, let's say you're trying to get something done within your own company. So maybe you're not trying to sell something to an outside company, but you're trying to convince someone in your company that something is a good idea, that we should create this new department, or this department needs to be dissolved because it doesn't really do much and is a drag on our resources, whatever. Sometimes you have what are called gatekeepers. These are people who are above you, who might stand in the way of you getting that through. So this could be your own supervisor. Maybe if you're writing to discuss problems in your department, and there's some human resources problems and there's some management problems, and but your own supervisor is part of the problem. Okay, that can be very difficult because that person might not want your proposal to go up any higher, and sometimes you just have to find a way to do that. So I'm not going to get into that too much. That's more of a human resources issue, but you want to just keep that stuff in mind. Okay, so there's several different possible audiences that could be reading your report, whether you address it to them or not. Okay, another thing to think about with your audience is that you want to, once you figure out who they are, at least your intended audience, the ones who you're trying to get to read it, you want to analyze who the people are so that you can use your information effectively to convince them, so that you can use either logos, pathos, or ethos, or a combination to convince them, and that you can use good visual design to present your ideas. Now, this is really important because some people don't care what the package looks like. They just want to know what the numbers are inside, right? So the visual design might be wasted on them. Some people, again, are more persuaded by facts or logic. Some are more persuaded by emotions, some by authority and credibility, and some by a combination. But if you understand and know your audience, get to know them, then you will know which ones to focus on the most. So again, this is sometimes it's difficult because you don't really know them. But in today's day and age here, to use a cliche, don't use that in your writing if you're my client or student. But today, it's really easy to find out about people. So, for example, you could go to my public Facebook page. You could probably Google me and find all kinds of stuff and find out some of my hobbies and interests, and you'd see pictures of me hiking in the mountains and playing my guitar, and you'd probably see a list of books that I've reviewed or that I've read and talked about. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could find out about me. And then if you were trying to persuade me of something, You'd say, oh yeah, this guy really likes the outdoors, or this guy really likes music. Maybe I can use some musical references, or maybe I can use in my proposal, or maybe I can use my use some lingo, some jargon that has to do with hiking and getting up the mountain and seeing getting to the next valley or whatever, right? So you can build in information that is going to speak the language of your reader if you can analyze them and understand who they are and what they like. All right, the next thing we want to talk about is context. And that means what's the situation in which the proposal is going to be read or used, and how that context is going to shape how the proposal is read, understood it. Sometimes a proposal is welcomed. Sometimes a proposal does. They know the problem, they know it, and they do something along with it. Sometimes a proposal is welcomed. Maybe it brings up a problem that they know about and don't know about, or a problem that they knew about but have been trying to fix really hard, or to fix it would cause some friction or some relationship issues, right? Whatever it is. So the context is really, really important. Some types of context that you can think about might be the physical context, the economic context, the ethical context, the political context. I'm not going to go into those in a lot of depth right now, but you just want to be aware of them because they can affect, again, how your proposal is received and or implemented or not, right? One of the things that could help about your readers' motives, okay? What are your readers' values and attitudes towards the idea that you are proposing? Again, is it something that, oh, they're really excited about your idea, or are they trying to ignore it? Or is it going to be something that's going to cause them pain or problems if your idea is implemented, right? Think about their emotions about it. Think about their motives. Are they just looking to profit? Are you addressing your proposal to somebody whose main motive is profit, or main motive is doing the right thing, or main motive is looking good in public, but they don't really care about doing the right thing or not. They just want people to think they're doing the right thing. I hate to say it, but there's people like that in this world. You've probably met some of them and worked for some of them. I know that I have, unfortunately. But that's just the way it is. However, if you can figure this out, then that will help you to understand, again, how to persuade them more effectively. All right, what else might you like your proposal to achieve? Are you talking about long-term goals, or are you just trying to change people's perception of your organization or of your cause or your company? Are you trying to do something good for society or just your local community? Or are you trying to improve efficiency or productivity, improve morale, et cetera, right? So think about your objectives. And again, what do you want your reader to do? That's a good question. I might even tape a second sticky note to my computer saying, what do I want my objectives to be after they've done what they are going to do, right? So for example, let's just say you're trying to write a proposal, you're trying to write a grant proposal, let's say, to a major foundation. This is maybe a nonprofit foundation that has a lot of money, and what their job is to give away money every year. And maybe this foundation has $10 million a year. It was set up by some rich person who died years ago, and they have $10 million per year that their job is to give it away to good causes. Okay. Well, you have a problem in your community where maybe the kids in your community are not learning art and music in school because the school has cut back funding on art and music teachers. So they don't have enough art and music classes, not enough teachers, the kids aren't getting exposed to enough culture. And so you go to this foundation and you say, I would like to help the kids in our community to have more exposure to art and music, theater, those kind of cultural things. Okay, so that is your objective, right? So what do you want your reader to do? You want them to give you money or give your nonprofit organization money. Why do you want them to give you money? That's your objective, is so that you can help the kids in your community have more exposure to culture, right? So that makes sense? Okay. All right. Now let's talk about reader-centered writing for a bit. This is also really important because this is where we get into the nitty-gritty, the nuts and bolts, the little details of actually writing your proposal. So once you have your ideas, you've done your research, you've found all your facts, you've analyzed your audience, you've figured out the context, you've figured out your goals and your objectives, then you actually have to write the darn thing, right? Okay. So when you actually start writing it, I highly recommend that you do it in a style that is called reader-centered writing. And I did not make this up. This is well known in sales writing and in technical writing. Okay, so you can probably go Google if you like this topic, if this makes sense to you. Hopefully it will. You can go look up on the internet and probably find 50 different articles or more on reader-centered writing and get more detail. But I'm just kind of going to give you a little overview of it here so to get you thinking about it. Because again, this is extremely, extremely important that you always keep your reader in mind, focus on your reader's needs, wants, and desires rather than your own, and you will be much more persuasive. And this applies whether you're trying to sell your reader something, whether you're trying to convince them of an idea, trying to get them to donate money, trying to get them to believe something. It doesn't matter. Any situation, if you focus on the reader's needs, wants, and desires, you will be more persuasive. It's just a proven fact. Okay, so what is reader-centered writing? Well, here's one brief definition. It's a means of delivering an easy-to-read document that clearly states its message. Now, did I say write at the first grade level? No. Did I say write it in 42-point font? No. Okay. There's other ways to make your document easy to read. So easy to read and be understood. So if the message is clearly stated, and that's what we're going to focus on here. So one of the things you want to do is avoid using I. If you can take the word I out as much as possible, you might use it once in a while. Okay, that's fine. You know, I did this research and I came up with these conclusions that are going to be good for your company, right? That's okay. But then focus on how it's going to affect their company. Don't keep talking about yourself. So focus on the reader's needs, wants, and desires. Correct word choice is really important, okay? I shouldn't even have to say this, but it is really important, okay? So you want to understand and use words in their proper context. And you need to understand the meaning of the word. So don't just stick in some fancy word because you looked it up in your thesaurus and you're trying to be unusual and fresh in your writing, right? Save that for, you know, when you're writing poetry for yourself, okay, and that nobody else is going to read. But you want to make sure that you understand the meaning of the word. Because if you don't understand the meaning of the word, or if it's a word that's not used in your common vocabulary or the common vocabulary of your industry, for example, then it's not going to be understood correctly by the reader. And that's going to be unclear. That's going to either make your reader feel stupid or feel like you're trying to show off and that you're arrogant or something, or it's going to just make it so that they just don't understand what you're saying, all right? And that's even worse, okay? So you want to definitely write in a way that your reader is going to understand. Now, if you're writing for, this is just an example here, most public newspapers are written for 11-year-old to 12-year-old, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids, okay? So around 5th grade level. They used to be written at 8th grade level, and we've actually are reading, at least in the United States, unfortunately, our literacy rate has gone downhill in the last few years. So when I first started teaching this class, classes that I teach, such as technical writing, such as business writing, such as proposal writing, such as grant writing, all of those kind of classes. When I first started teaching those 25 years ago, I used to use a statistic and say that that the general public reads at about an 8th grade level. Well, unfortunately, that has gone down to about a 5th grade level now. It's really kind of sad. But if you know that, then that's the way it is. However, you might not be writing to the general public. You might be specializing in selling certain products to doctors and attorneys or education professionals, right? So those people you could expect to have a higher level of education, and you can use higher level vocabulary. Also, again, remember to use the correct words that are the jargon, the specialized terms that are used in that industry. If you are writing in an industry, you can use certain technical terms, but if you're not writing, if you're writing outside of your industry or to what we call lay people, and that's used sometimes in the church, they call lay people, but it's also used in industry. So lay people would be people who are not specialists in a certain area. Now, if you're an engineer and you're writing to a bunch of other engineers, well, sure, you can use a lot of technical engineering terms. But if you're an engineer and you're trying to write a proposal that a bunch of politicians are going to read and bureaucrats, because they're going to decide whether you are allowed to build this new bridge or not, then you need to write in language that they're going to understand. So you can use analogies, you can use definitions, you can use pictures, you can use all kinds of things to help. But you definitely want to avoid that jargon and stuff. All right. Sentence structure is really important. You want to select your words carefully and vary your sentence structure. Do not start every single sentence with the same phrase. So there are or there is, for example, that's very typical sentence structure that people will use in their writing. Just eliminate that and just say it, okay? Or change the order around in the next sentence. Don't start 3 sentences in a row with there is blah blah, there is blah blah, there is blah blah, right? So vary your sentence structure. It just makes it more interesting. But also vary the sentence size. That's also important, because the length, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Sentence length is important. I think that's on my next slide. You want to write as clearly and concisely as possible. If you can say something in 10 words instead of 20, then do it. Okay. And again, choose the right word that means exactly what you want it to mean. People aren't always going to understand it exactly the way you meant it, but at least you tried. Okay. So again, don't look up in the thesaurus and find some unusual word that hasn't been used since 1873 just because it sounds cool. Okay? You want to use the one that they're going to understand. Another thing you want to do is avoid passive voice. So this is like an example. The chocolate was eaten. Well, okay, the chocolate is gone, but we don't know where it went or who did it, right? But at least in my house, this would be the case. My wife ate the chocolate. Okay. Now, of course, she's in the other room, and I have the door shut, so she can't hear me right now. She's probably over there eating chocolate as we speak. Yes. Okay. But yes. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I got a little comment here. This is good. Yes, subject, verb, object is your friend. Yes, okay, that's good. Make sure you have subject, verb, object in every sentence, and then you'll be fine. So that's important. Thank you for that share. Yes. Okay, now this tells us, though, if you say my wife ate the chocolate rather than chocolate was eaten, it tells us what was done and who did it, and that is more clear. Okay. Sometimes, though, okay, let me go back to that for just a minute, because sometimes, especially politicians, politicians and 3-year-olds will use passive voice quite a bit because they'll use it to avoid responsibility. Okay, so the politician might say, "Oh yes, the funds were spent." Okay, the funds were spent, as opposed to saying, you know, yes, I spent the money, or the funds were taken, instead of yes, I took the money and took my family on vacation to Hawaii, right? 3-year-olds might use it about, you know, the candy or the cookies, right? Oh, yes, the cookies got eaten. The cookies were eaten. I don't know who did it. Right? Okay. But politicians and 3-year-olds can use passive voice to avoid responsibility, but you should not use it. All right. Kind of as I alluded to in the last slide, you want to reduce wordiness. Try to say the same thing in fewer words if possible, and vary the length of your sentences, not just the structure of them. But it's okay to have a long sentence once in a while if you need to, but don't have 4 really long sentences in a row. Break them up with some shorter sentences in between. Or try to avoid the really, really long sentences if you can. Sometimes you're trying to describe a really complex idea or situation, and you just have to use some embedded clauses and whatever. But try to avoid that. Again, just try to make it more clear. Another thing you can do is you can take, let's say if you're writing a sentence and you have 3 or more items in that sentence that you're listing out with commas. Our company is interested in hiring motivated employees who, no, that's not a good example. Employees who are motivated, comma, hardworking, comma, loyal, comma, and intelligent, period. Okay. So instead of writing that out in a long sentence with a bunch of commas, you can just say, our company is interested in hiring employees who are, colon, and then list those 4 things in bullet points. And then that will be easier to scan for the reader. All right. Of course, you want to avoid errors. One of the things that why I am really picky about when I'm teaching a class with my students, I point out a lot of their errors, not to be mean to them, but to help them. When I'm working with professional salespeople and other professional people, I talk to them and I say, look, your writing is as important as your business card, maybe more important. So let's say you got up today and you have your personal ethos, your credibility. You have put on a really nice suit, and you have a freshly shined shoes, and you got a nice haircut. You took a shower that day. Thank you for doing that. You got your haircut. You just, you look really good. Then you walk in and you hand the proposal to your client, and it's in a nice shiny folder, and you hand them your nice slick business card, and you say, okay, here, read this, and please get back to me. Well, then they go to read, and they like you. Okay, so you've covered a lot of the original ground in trying to persuade them. You have the ethos and the pathos, the emotions of liking you, the ethos, you have the credibility. But then they sit there and start reading your proposal, and it has 4 misspelled words, it has some punctuation errors, it has some grammar mistakes, and they look at it and they say, wow, well, if this is, if this is a document that this salesperson had, or this company had, all the time in the world to put together, and it looks this unprofessional and has this many mistakes, what if we were to hire them and pay them money to do something, and we needed it done tomorrow or next week? Well, what kind of job are they going to do? Well, it definitely makes them think twice about hiring you, okay? So just work on it. I know, writing is not everybody's favorite thing to do, but if you're going to produce a document that is going to be used and try to persuade someone, whether you're trying to sell them something or get them to donate money to you, believe in your political cause, whatever, have somebody help you proofread it if you know you have problems. Of course, what I would recommend is just get better at writing yourself, just as good as you can at it. I got as good as I could at algebra, and that was all I had to do. And okay, it wasn't my favorite subject. But I don't have to use algebra every day in my work. I do have to use written and verbal speech in my work every day. So I have tried to get as good as I can at doing that. So I recommend that you do that as well. All right, format is really important, and formatting your document can really help to make it reader-centered, meaning more clear and concise. Use subject headings, use bulleted lists. You can use graphs and charts and tables to represent numbers. Pretty much anytime you have numbers in your paragraph, put those numbers in some kind of a graph or a chart or a table. If you can use a picture to help illustrate a point. Now, don't fill your document up with a bunch of cheesy clip art, okay, because that can be overkill. And cheesy clip art is, well, cheesy, so just don't do that. But if you can, use as many graphs, charts, tables, and other pictures as you can to help illustrate your points, especially because a lot of people now are visually oriented and don't read very much, okay? It's not just the kids that aren't reading, it's the adults aren't reading as much either. But everybody's used to looking at the internet, to watching TV, seeing billboards and other advertisements that have a lot of pictures in them. So if you can use pictures, graphs, charts, tables, etc., that help to bring your point home and illustrate your point or expand on it, then go ahead and do that, because some people aren't going to read every single word of your proposal, no matter how much, I hate to break this to you, but no matter how hard you have worked on writing it, they're just not going to read every single word. They're going to scan through and look at the headings and scan through the bulleted list. They're going to look at a couple of charts. If you're lucky, they might read the introduction and the conclusion parts in detail, but mostly they're not going to read every single word. Another thing you can do is you can use different font sizes and color to highlight things. Again, use these with restraint, though. If you emphasize, if you have a 300-word paragraph and you have 150 words in there that are in bold, well, that kind of devalues it, right? So, have 3 or 4 words in bold, the most important ones. Then, of course, white space. White space, that just means any place on the document where there are no text and no pictures. So no matter what color the background is, even if you have green background, or this applies to, actually this formatting here applies to PowerPoint slides, it applies to brochures, memos, reports, just about anything. But white space is really important because what it does is it separates items in the viewer's eyes and groups things together. So if you see space between something, you know that it's a new idea maybe. Right. Okay, so we've covered a lot of stuff today, and I hope you learned something useful. Just remember to pay attention to what you have learned and the things we talked about today, including Aristotle's means of persuasion, ethos, pathos, and logos, all the purposes, the context, the elements of your proposals, and try to use reader-centered writing. And if you do this, trust me, you will be more persuasive and more successful. And just one more thing, I just did want to remind you that coming up sometime soon, hopefully by the end of the month, is what I'm hoping, we will have our complete 6-module online course that will be available. It's going to be called Real Fast Influence and Persuasion. It will be a video course, kind of just like these webinars that I'm doing right now, but we'll have 6 different modules talking about all different elements of influence and persuasion. And my co-author is Daniel Hall, who is an attorney. He has a couple of really great modules in there about negotiation and mediation and different strategies he has learned as an attorney. So is including, and some other stuff, really cool stuff. So look for that in the near future. And just thank you all for coming. I will take, if there are a couple of quick questions, if you wanted to put them in the chat box. I do have time for a couple of quick questions if anybody has any. Otherwise, I know I threw a lot of stuff at you today. You can also write in there how much you love me and, you know, what a great job I did. And, you know, I don't mind hearing that kind of stuff too. Yeah. Okay. Like begging for compliments here, right? Okay. Here you go. Thank you. I appreciate that one. Yes. Great. Okay. All righty. Good. Okay. All right. Well, I don't see any questions, so I will. Yes, I will. Yes, I will pat myself on the back. Thank you. Okay. Appreciate that. So I will put a recording of this up if you registered for this. If you didn't get, I guess if you're not listening now, then you wouldn't be listening to that part. But I was going to say if you didn't get to hear the whole thing, you get the recording. But anybody who registered for this will, I will send a link out to the recording of it and hopefully have that up by tonight or tomorrow. So again, thank you very much for attending our webinar, and I will see you on the next one. Have a great day. Bye-bye.